The afternoon my son brought his new partner home for dinner, he introduced me as his retired father who had always been good with his hands. She looked around the living room at the worn furniture, the old television, the stack of library books. She smiled the way people smile when they have already decided something about you. I smiled back and said nothing. That was 8 months ago, and if I had corrected her assumption that day, everything that followed would have ended very differently. Not for me, for them. My name is Raymond. I am 64 years old. I drive a 2009 pickup truck with a cracked windshield I have been meaning to fix for 3 years. I buy my jeans at Walmart. I cut my own grass. And I own 8 residential properties in this county, all paid off, worth just under $2.5 million. But nobody in my son's new life knew that. They saw a retired man in a worn flannel shirt and decided what I was. That decision set off a chain of events that would test my marriage, my son's loyalty, and everything I had spent 37 years building. The question was not whether I could stop them. The question was whether I wanted to. I started with nothing. 1979, I was 23 years old, working double shifts at the plant, living in a rented room with a hot plate and a mattress on the floor. My father never owned a home in his life. He died renting. I decided early that would not be me. In 1987, I had saved enough for a down payment on a 3-bedroom house in a neighborhood people were leaving. It cost $37,000. I fixed the plumbing myself. I painted every room. I rented out the 2 extra bedrooms to guys from the plant. That first property taught me something important. The people who make money in real estate are not the ones who buy the nicest houses. They are the ones who buy the ugliest houses in the neighborhoods about to turn. I bought the second one 2 years later, a duplex near the hospital. The roof leaked. The basement flooded every spring. The seller thought he was unloading a problem. He was right. But I knew how to fix a roof, and I knew how to seal a basement, and I knew that a hospital-adjacent rental would never sit empty. By the time Nathan was in middle school, I had 4 properties, 12 rental units. Every dollar I made went back into the next one. I drove the same car for 11 years. I packed my lunch. I did the work myself because I could not afford to pay someone else to do it. That is how it happened. There was no inheritance. There was no lucky stock tip. There was just the slow, grinding method of a man who refused to be poor forever. Then I met Linda. She came to look at the duplex. She was looking for an apartment and I was the landlord. I showed her the unit and she pointed out 3 things wrong with it that I had missed. She was right about all 3. I married her 14 months later. Linda understood what we were building. She had grown up poor too, and she had the same hunger, just quieter. She worked at the county assessor's office. She knew property tax codes inside out. She knew when to appeal an assessment and when to let it ride. She was the one who suggested the trust structure in 2009. She sat at this very kitchen table with a legal pad and drew the entire thing out by hand. That way, she said, if anything happens to either of us, it stays in the family, not in court, not with a spouse who might not understand what we built. She looked at me when she said that part. She was not talking about herself. She said, your son will marry someone someday, Raymond, and you will not know who she really is until she has something to gain. I thought she was being cynical. She was not. She was being Linda. Nathan never knew the specifics. We talked about the houses the way you talk about the weather. We are doing some work on the Burnside property. The tenant in the Jackson unit is moving out. He knew we were comfortable. He knew he would go to college without debt, but he did not know the numbers. That was deliberate. Linda and I agreed early that you do not raise a child with a safety net so thick he never learns to walk. We wanted him to work. We wanted him to earn his own way. And he did. He got a degree in marketing. He got a job at a firm downtown. He met Claire at a networking event. She worked in wealth management. That is what she called it, wealth management. She was 28 years old and she had been trained to look at people and calculate what they were worth. She looked at Nathan and saw potential. Then she looked at me and saw something else. The morning they came for the first time, I was under the sink. I heard the door open. I heard Nathan say, "Dad, we are here," and I took my time. I wanted to see her eyes when she walked in. I wiped my hands on a rag and came out. She shook my hand. Her eyes moved across the room. The worn couch I had reupholstered twice. The old television from 2004, the stack of library books on the coffee table, and she smiled. That smile, the one that says, "I see exactly who you are." I smiled back and said nothing. That was 18 months ago, and I let that first impression stand. Over the next year I watched. Claire asked questions that sounded casual but landed in specific places. How long had I lived here? Did I own the house outright? Had I ever thought about downsizing? Then the questions shifted. Did I have a financial planner? How did I handle taxes? Had I considered a reverse mortgage? Each question was a probe, gentle, polite, wrapped in concern. And each time I answered honestly but incompletely. I kept things simple, I said. She smiled at that word. Simple, she repeated it like it tasted good. In March, she brought up the LLC. She sat at my kitchen table, both hands around a coffee mug, and said her father had been helping elderly neighbors structure their assets. She said it with such warmth that if I had not been paying attention, I might have believed her. I was paying attention. I said I would think about it. Then I called Howard. Howard is my attorney. He has known me for 15 years. He knows every property I own. He knows Linda's trust. He knows my will. I told him what was happening. Howard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Raymond, do you want to move anything around? I said not yet. I wanted to see what they were really after. He told me to call when I needed him. I told him to keep his calendar open. April, Nathan came alone. He sat at the same kitchen table with that same jaw set he had as a boy. He said Claire had been doing research. He said her father suggested an LLC structure, joint ownership, me and them together. He said it would protect me. I looked at my son. I asked him whose idea this really was. He could not answer. That was my answer. I told him I needed a couple weeks. He hugged me at the door, and I held on a moment longer because he was my son and he was in over his head, and he did not even know it yet. That afternoon, I told Howard I was ready. We spent 3 evenings going through everything. Linda's trust was still airtight. It already did everything the proposed LLC claimed to do, with better tax treatment, better protection, no outside parties. Howard prepared a 1-page summary, 8 properties, 31 rental units, all paid off. Combined estimated value, just under $2.4 million. I put the folder in my desk drawer, and I waited. On a Saturday in May, Gerald arrived. He drove a car I recognized from the badge, top trim. He had the handshake of a man who practices it. We sat in the living room. He talked about market conditions, estate planning, generational wealth. He was smooth. Then he unfolded a document on my coffee table. It was a draft LLC operating agreement. My name as founding member, 40% interest. Claire and Gerald together held 60%. The asset listed for contribution was my house, just my house. Gerald explained it carefully, purely protective. I would stay in the house for as long as I wanted. This was what he would do for his own father. I looked at the document. Then I looked at Gerald. I knew exactly what he was doing. The question was whether he knew what I was. I knew exactly what he was doing. The question was whether he knew what I was. I asked Gerald what he knew about my financial situation. He said what Claire had shared with him, a retired man on a fixed income with a paid-off house. I asked if he had done any independent research. He said he had not felt it was necessary. I nodded. Then I excused myself and walked to my desk. The folder was in the bottom drawer, right where I had left it. I had been holding it for weeks, waiting for the right moment. I did not know until that second that this was the moment, but it was. I walked back into the living room and sat down. I set the folder on the coffee table next to his LLC agreement. I told him I wanted to share something before we went any further. I opened the folder and slid a single sheet of paper across the table. 1 page, plain text, no logos, no letterhead, just addresses and numbers. I did not look at him when he picked it up. I watched my son. Gerald read it. His expression did not collapse dramatically. It changed slowly, the way color drains from something. First his eyebrows shifted, then his mouth went still, then his eyes moved back to the top of the page and started over, slower this time. He looked up at me, he looked back down at the paper, he read it a 3rd time. Claire leaned over from the couch. She said, "What is it?" Gerald did not answer. She took the page from his hand, she read it. Her face did the same thing her father's had done, just faster. She read faster too. She got to the bottom and stopped. She looked at me, then she looked at Nathan. Nathan was sitting next to her. He had not seen it yet. She handed it to him without a word. He took it. He read it. I watched his face. He was my son. I knew every expression he had ever made. This one I had never seen before. It was confusion and recognition and something like vertigo all at once. He read the bottom line, $2.4 million. No mortgage, 31 rental units, 8 properties, sole beneficiary. He set the paper down on the coffee table. He looked at me. He said, "Dad." I said, "Son." He said, "I did not know." I said, "I knew you did not." Gerald folded his LLC agreement and put it back in his jacket pocket. He stood up. He said they should give us some time. He said it had been a pleasure meeting me. We both knew he meant none of it, but I did not hate him for it. He was a businessman. He had made a calculation and the calculation had been wrong. It happens. He walked toward the door. Claire followed, but she stopped and turned. She looked at me. It was not anger exactly. It was the look of someone recalculating every assumption she had made for the past 18 months. I had seen that look before, in negotiations, in rooms where someone realizes halfway through that they have misread the situation entirely. She said nothing. She turned and left. The door closed. I heard Gerald's car start, then I heard it pull away. The house went quiet. Nathan did not leave. He sat at my kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface, not speaking. The late afternoon light came through the window, that particular gold. Linda always said it made the kitchen look like a painting. I made coffee. I set a cup in front of him. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Dad, why did not you tell me?" I had been asking myself the same thing. Part of it was old habit. Linda and I kept things private for so long it became second nature. Part of it was that I was waiting for him to be ready. And part of it, I admitted to him, was that when I saw how things were unfolding, I wanted to understand what I was dealing with before I showed my hand. He said he felt like an idiot. I told him not to. I told him I had let it happen by staying quiet too long, and that was on me. Claire had not invented anything that was not already there. I had left a gap. People fill gaps. He said he should have asked. He should have pushed back when Claire started steering things, but it had felt easier to let her handle it. He said he was ashamed of that. I told him shame was only useful if it led somewhere. He asked what he should do now. I said that was between him and his wife. I had no opinion about his marriage. That was not my place to give. What I had was time. Time I should have used differently, and I intended to use it better going forward. He looked at the coffee cup. He picked it up. He set it down. He said, "She thought you were just a regular retired guy." I said I was. He almost smiled. Then he asked me the question I had been dreading and hopping for in equal measure. He asked me to tell him everything, how it started, how it grew, what each property had cost, what it had taken to hold on to it in the lean years. He said he wanted to understand not just what existed, but why. I sat down across from him. The last of the evening light was fading through the window. I took a breath, and I started talking. I told him about the winter of 1994. The third building was a 4-unit on Burnside. The boiler was old when I bought the place. I knew it would need replacing eventually, but eventually came on a Tuesday night in January when the temperature dropped to -12 and the boiler seized solid. I had 11 tenants in that building, 11 people with children and jobs and nowhere else to go. The insurance disputed the claim, called it pre-existing wear and tear. They offered $1,200. The repair estimate was $8,000. I did not have $8,000. I had the equity in the other properties, but that was tied up in the banks. I spent 4 months working weekends. I took a second shift at the plant, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. Linda brought me dinner in a thermos every night. I replaced the boiler myself with a used unit I found at a salvage yard. Cost me $2,300. It took me 7 weeks to install it. I did not tell Nathan any of that at the time. He was 12 years old. He thought we were fine. I told him about 2001. The market was hot. Everyone was buying. I had my eye on a 6-unit building near the university. The numbers looked good, almost too good. I had been in the game 14 years by then. I knew that feeling. That feeling when a deal seems perfect is usually the feeling of a mistake waiting to happen, but I was not going to pass it up. I had the financing lined up. I had the down payment. I had a handshake agreement with the seller. Then Linda sat me down at this very table and said, "Raymond, we are not doing this." She had run the numbers again. She had spotted something I missed. The building had a deferred maintenance issue that would eat up the profit margin for the first 5 years, and the market was overheated. She said we would get caught if it turned. I argued. I was angry. I thought she was being too cautious. She was not. She was right. The market turned 12 months later. That building sold at a loss. The guy who bought it lost it in foreclosure. Linda never said I told you so. She did not have to. That was when we started the trust. She drew it out on a legal pad. She said if anything happens to one of us, the other should not have to fight a court or a family member or some future in-law for what we built. She named Nathan as sole beneficiary, and she added that clause, the one that said no spouse could access or transfer without Nathan's explicit consent and independent legal counsel. She said it while looking at me, not because she was worried about me. She was worried about my son's future wife. She had never met Claire, but she knew the type. I kept going. I told him about the years that followed, the slow grind of managing 31 units, the evictions, the late-night calls about broken water heaters, the tenants who paid cash and never caused trouble, the tenants who caused trouble and never paid, the year I had to replace 4 roofs in 8 months, the year I lost $20,000 to a contractor who took the money and disappeared, the year Linda got sick the first time, that was 2005, she recovered. Then she got sick again in 2008, she recovered again. The third time, in 2012, she did not. I told him about the hospital, the last conversation we had. She was lucid. She asked about the properties. She asked if I had done the annual review on the trust. I had. She asked if I had updated the insurance on the Jackson property. I had. She nodded. Then she said, you are going to have to tell him someday. I said I knew. She said, do not wait too long. She said, you have a tendency to wait for the perfect moment, and the perfect moment does not come. You just have to pick one. I said I would. She closed her eyes. That was the last thing she said to me. Nathan was quiet. He had heard some of this before, but not all of it. Not the details, not the numbers, not the full shape of what we had built. I told him everything. The addresses, the purchase prices, the current values, the rents, the expenses, the names of the tenants who had been there for years. I told him about the trust that he was the sole beneficiary of and how Claire and Gerald's proposed LLC would have undone everything Linda had designed. He looked at the one-page summary again. He said, Dad, this is beautiful. He said it like he meant it. He said, you and Mom built this from nothing. I said, we did. Then he asked the question I had been waiting for. He said, what do you want me to do? I said I wanted him to learn. I wanted him to understand how it all worked. I wanted him to know what Linda had wanted for him, not the money, the understanding. I said the money was just a byproduct. The real thing was the patience, the capacity to wait, the willingness to do the work yourself when no one else would do it for you. I told him that was what Linda and I had built, not a portfolio, a way of moving through the world. He said, Claire wants to apologize. I said I was open to that. He asked if I was angry at her. I thought about it. I said no. I said I had been watchful and careful and maybe a little bit satisfied at the end of it. Not in a mean way, in the way you feel when a thing you built holds up under pressure and you get to see it hold. I said the harder feeling was something between regret and relief. The feeling of a man who let things drift a little too long and caught them just before they drifted out of reach. He nodded. He looked at the gold evening light coming through the kitchen window. He said, she has been calling me. She wants to fix this. She wants to know what we do next. I told him that was his call, his marriage, his life. I had no instructions. I had time I should have used differently, and I intended to use it better going forward. He said, Dad, thank you for not giving up on me. I said there was never a version of this where I gave up on you, not ever. That was not something he needed to thank me for. That was just the job. He smiled. He stood up. He said he needed to go home and have a real conversation with his wife. He said he did not know what it would look like, but it was going to happen. He hugged me at the door. I put my hand on the back of his head the way I did when he was small. After he left, I stood on the porch. The oak tree in the front yard that Linda planted the year we moved in was coming into its spring leaves. I had been meaning to have the lower branches trimmed. I kept forgetting. I went inside. I called Howard. He picked up on the second ring. I told him it was done. He asked how it went. I said it went the way things go when you are patient enough to wait for the right moment, and you have spent 37 years making sure you have something worth waiting for. Howard laughed. He said Linda would have loved this. I said I knew she would have. I said she would have had something specific and pointed to say about Gerald's jacket. He laughed again. He told me to get some rest. I locked up the house. I turned off the downstairs lights. I walked through the kitchen where Nathan and I had sat, where that gold evening light came through the window that Linda always called her favorite thing about the whole house. I turned off that light last. I went upstairs. I set the folder on the nightstand on my side of the bed. I slept the way I have learned to sleep over these years, not perfectly, not without weight, but soundly. The sleep of a man who built something slowly and carefully and watched it hold. 3 weeks later, Nathan came by on a Sunday morning alone. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table. He said they had been doing a lot of talking, real talking. He said the kind they probably should have been doing for a while. He said Claire had admitted that her father had pushed the idea harder than she had let on. She was embarrassed. They were working through it. I said I was glad. He said she wanted to apologize in person. He asked if I was open to that. I said of course I was. She was his wife. That made her family. I had not given up on family in 64 years, and I was not about to start now. He looked at the table for a moment, then he looked up. He said she will be here in an hour. Is that okay? I said it was. He smiled. I made more coffee. The morning light came through the window. The same window, the same light. It made everything look, just for a moment, like it was exactly enough. Because it was. It had always been exactly enough. She arrived at 10 in the morning. I saw her car pull up. She sat in the driveway for a moment before she got out. I understood that. It takes a moment to compose yourself before you walk into a room where you have been wrong. I opened the door before she knocked. She was holding a small potted plant, a peace lily. She said she did not know what to bring. I said she did not have to bring anything. She came inside. We sat at the kitchen table. Nathan sat between us. She set the plant down and folded her hands. She looked at me. She said, "Raymond, I owe you an apology." I let her say it. She said she had made assumptions. She said she had let her father's thinking guide her. She said she had seen what she expected to see and never looked deeper. She said she was sorry. I said, "I accept your apology." She waited. She said, "Is there anything else you want to say to me?" I thought about it. I said, "You are young. You were trained to evaluate people by their surface. That training will serve you poorly unless you learn to question it." I said, "I'm not angry, but I want you to understand something. The assumptions you made about me are the same assumptions people make about every older person they decide is past their prime. It is ageism. It is quiet. It is dressed in concern, and it is wrong." She nodded. She said, "I see that now." I said, "Good. That is all I needed." She stayed for an hour. We talked about ordinary things, the weather, the oak tree, her work. She asked questions that were different this time. She asked what I had learned about managing properties over the years. She asked what Linda had been like. I answered. She listened. At the door, she hugged me. It was not performative. It was genuine. I believed it. After she left, Nathan stayed. He helped me with the dishes. He asked if I wanted to go over the properties with him again. I said this weekend. He said Saturday morning. I said Saturday morning was good. That was 3 months ago. Since then, things have shifted. Nathan comes by every Saturday. We go through the books together. He is learning. He asks good questions. He caught a mistake in the insurance renewals that would have cost us. I did not tell him I had already caught it. I let him find it. That is how you teach. Claire comes sometimes. She brings food. She has stopped trying to manage things. She asks about the tenants by name. She has started volunteering at a senior center on weekends. She told me it was because of what I said. I told her that was her choice, not mine. She said she knew. She said it was the right choice. I saw Gerald once. He called me. He asked if we could meet for coffee. I said yes. We met at a diner on Clement Street, the same one I go to on Tuesday mornings. He ordered black coffee and did not drink it. He said he wanted to apologize too. He said he had misread the situation badly. He said he had made assumptions based on incomplete information. He said it would not happen again. I told him I appreciated that. I told him I had no interest in holding a grudge. I told him the trust was already set up. I told him Nathan was the sole beneficiary. I told him the structure was ironclad. I asked if he understood. He said he did. I said, "Then we are fine." He shook my hand. He left. I finished my coffee. I paid the bill. Now it is September. The oak tree in the front yard has started dropping acorns. I finally called someone about trimming the lower branches. He is coming next week. Nathan is coming tomorrow morning. Claire is bringing a casserole. The peace lily is still on the kitchen windowsill. It is thriving. One thing I did not tell Nathan until last week, something I had been holding back, something Linda and I had agreed on but never executed. I told him that the duplex near the hospital, the second property I ever bought, the one I fixed the roof on myself, the one where I met Linda, that property she had been paying on for 33 years, that one was already in his name. I transferred it 5 years ago. He did not know. The tax bills go to a PO box. Howard handles the paperwork. I never told him because I wanted him to learn to stand on his own first. He asked why I was telling him now. I said because I realized I was still waiting for the perfect moment, and the perfect moment does not come, you just have to pick one. He sat at the kitchen table, he looked at the document, he looked at me, he said, "Did Mom know?" I said she was the one who suggested it. He did not say anything for a long time, then he folded the paper carefully and put it in his pocket. He said, "Thank you." I said, "You are welcome." He said, "I am going to take care of it." I said, "I know you will." The morning light came through the window, the same gold. Linda always said that light made the kitchen look like a painting. She was right, it still does. I am 64 years old. I drive the same truck. I buy my jeans at Walmart. I cut my own grass. I still fix my own pipes. None of that has changed. The folder is still in my desk drawer. The trust is still airtight. Nathan is still my son, and the light still comes through the window every morning. Some things you hold on to, some things you let go. The trick is knowing which is which. I am still learning, but I have had 37 years of practice, and I intend to keep practicing. I am still learning, but I have had 37 years of practice, and I intend to keep practicing. There is a pattern here that goes beyond my kitchen table. Every year, thousands of older Americans find themselves in a similar position. Adult children, well-meaning or not, begin to edge their way into financial decisions. They see a parent past their prime. They see an asset that could be better managed, a house that could be sold, a portfolio that could be restructured. And they move slowly, with concern in their voices and papers in their hands. The research bears this out. Over 60% of substantiated elder financial abuse cases involve an adult child, not a stranger, not a scammer, a son or daughter. It starts as concern. It becomes control. It ends with someone losing something they spent a lifetime building. But there is another pattern, quieter, less reported, the one where the parent sees it coming, the one where the parent has been watching and waiting and holding the full picture close, the one where the parent does not need protection, just patience, because competence does not vanish at 65. The ability to make sound financial decisions does not evaporate because someone's hair turns gray. Physical decline is not mental decline. And a lifetime of experience is not something to be managed by someone half your age. I do not tell this story to embarrass my son or his wife. I tell it because it happens every day in kitchens like mine, and most people never hear the version where the parent holds the cards. Most stories end with the transfer, with the LLC, with the slow erosion of something built over decades. I was lucky. I had a lawyer I trusted. I had a wife who saw the future clearly and built a wall around it. I had the discipline to wait and watch before I acted. Not everyone has those things, and the people who do not are the ones who need to hear this most. If you are older and someone in your life is starting to ask questions that feel too specific, too structured, too convenient for them, pay attention. You do not have to be rude. You do not have to accuse. You just have to pause. Consult someone independent. Get a second opinion. And remember that you have been making decisions your whole life. You have not stopped being capable of it. Nathan and Claire are doing well. They come for Sunday dinners. Claire still asks questions, but now they are different. She asks what I think. She asks how I would handle something. She listens to the answer. That is progress. As for me, I will be under the kitchen sink next week. The drain has been running slow. I could call a plumber, but I know how to fix it. And some things you do not hand off just because you can. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one, quiet stories of people who built something real and held on to it through everything. We tell them here, and we will keep telling them as long as there are people willing to listen.